My name is Linda, and I'm 69 years old. What I'm about to share isn't just a story, it's a scar that still bleeds inside me. It's the story of the day I was thrown out of the very house I helped build by the woman who married my son. For years, my life in California was simple, but filled with love. I woke up early, made coffee, fixed breakfast for everyone, packed lunches for my two little grandkids, folded laundry, and checked their homework. I was the invisible foundation of that home, invisible in every sense. As time passed, I realized my presence had become more of a convenience than an act of love. My son Ethan had once been a gentle boy who always protected me, especially after my husband, Mark Miller, passed away from heart disease in his early 60s. Ethan was the only reason I kept going. When he married Rachel, I welcomed her with open arms, the daughter I never had. At first, Rachel was sweet. "Mrs. Linda, you're like a second mother to me," she would say with a soft smile. But over time, that sweetness turned bitter. Her kind words became corrections. Her glances became disapproval whenever I cooked, cleaned, or cared for the kids. Slowly, everything I did was called too much or unnecessary. "Don't worry, I'll handle it," Rachel would say, but she never did. Then her parents began visiting, at first for a few days, then weeks, and finally, they moved in permanently. "Mom," Ethan said in a rushed call, "Rachel's dad isn't doing well. They'll stay for just a few days." But those few days turned into months. The living room became their bedroom. My favorite chair was moved to the porch. My husband's photo was taken down. My things were packed into boxes with the promise, "It's only temporary, Mrs. Linda." But that temporary never ended. What hurt most wasn't losing space, it was losing my place in my son's heart. Ethan started avoiding me, speaking less, and every time I entered a room, he went silent, as if my existence was a burden. Then came the day everything fell apart. Rachel called me to the living room, the room that used to be mine, now filled with her parents' portraits, their gaudy decorations, and the heavy scent of perfume that made my head ache. She sat upright, like someone in control of the whole world, while Ethan kept his head down, unable to look at me. "Mrs. Linda," Rachel said coldly, "you've always been important to us, but things have changed. My parents need a stable home and care. So, this house will be theirs now. I think it's time for you to find a place of your own, somewhere quieter and more comfortable." Ethan stayed silent. Not a single word. His silence cut deeper than any insult. I stood there, numb. The world seemed to slow down. I wanted to speak, to scream, but my throat locked up. In the end, I just nodded, maybe because I knew there was no point fighting anymore. A few hours later, my life fit into a handful of cardboard boxes, a few clothes, some books, and one old photo of Ethan as a little boy, the only thing I refused to leave behind. I still remember the sound of the door slamming behind me. That sharp click was like the stamp of abandonment. The sky that day was blindingly blue, a cruel contrast to the emptiness inside me. My boxes stacked on the sidewalk, my hands shaking, and the bitter taste of despair on my tongue. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered help. Only laughter and music floated out of the house, as if nothing had happened. I sat on the curb, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I cried not because I lost a home, but because I lost something I thought was eternal, unconditional love. But what they didn't know was that the moment they threw me out that door, I planted a small seed, one that would change everything. Because behind the gentle shell of an old woman was a truth they never saw coming. People often think abandonment begins the moment you're pushed away. But really, it starts long before that, seeping in slowly, like moisture creeping through the walls, until one day you realize everything has already decayed. I thought a lot about it that quiet afternoon, sitting on the curb beside my old boxes. It wasn't that I lost my place that day. I had been losing it little by little, long before. When Ethan married Rachel, I was full of hope. She seemed intelligent, polite, and most importantly, she made my son happy. To me, that was enough. The wedding was small and simple, but full of laughter. I still remember holding Mark's hand and saying, "We did it. Our boy found his happiness." But a few years later, I was alone. When Mark passed away, half of my strength went with him. Ethan didn't want me to live by myself, so he offered, "Mom, why stay alone in that old apartment? Move in with us. We'll be together. You'll be happier with the kids around." I agreed, not because I needed a roof over my head, but because I still wanted to be a mother. When Ethan and Rachel decided to buy their dream home in suburban California, I had to sell the small inheritance left by my parents to help them. At first, Ethan hesitated to accept the money, but Rachel was quick and charming. "Oh, Mom, Linda, that's such a big help. This way we can finally buy our dream house and you'll live with us too. We're all family here." So part of the down payment for that house came from my last bit of savings. In return, Ethan added my name to the property title as a co-owner, a sweet gesture, almost symbolic at the time, and I didn't think much of it. I believed in love, in family, in my son. The first few years were warm and happy. My two grandchildren, Jack, 12, and Emma, 8, became the center of my world. I woke up early to make their milk, rocked them to sleep, cooked oatmeal, told bedtime stories, and took them to the park nearby. Their bright eyes lit up every time I told stories from our family's past. But slowly, those warm gestures began to change color. Rachel, who once said, "Thank you, Mom, Linda, you're an angel," now smiled faintly and said, "Mom, don't worry so much. You're spoiling the kids." I was going to make something else today, but oh well, you've already cooked. When I cleaned, she'd say, "Let me take care of that. Please don't touch my things." Bit by bit, I was pushed out of every little task in the house, not because she was kind, but because she wanted control. Family dinners became less frequent. When their friends came over, I wasn't invited to the table anymore. I stayed in the kitchen. My birthday gifts became impersonal and thoughtless. In the family photos hanging on the walls, my face slowly disappeared. Then Rachel's parents started showing up more often. At first on weekends, then with suitcases, and finally, they moved in for good. "Rachel's parents need a place to rest, Mom," Ethan said. "Her dad isn't well, but don't worry, it's just temporary." I let out a bitter laugh. I was nearly their age, yet somehow I was the one considered too old to stay. The living room became their bedroom. The TV room was rearranged. My books were packed away to make space for Rachel's mother's porcelain collection. My favorite armchair, the one Mark had given me for our anniversary, was moved to the laundry area, so it wouldn't block the walkway, inch by inch. I was pushed back until there wasn't a single corner of that house left that belonged to me. Even then, I clung to my grandchildren. They were my last refuge. We ran around the backyard, secretly baked cookies when Rachel wasn't watching, and shared bedtime stories in whispers. But even that was taken away. "Mom, let Rachel handle the kids," Ethan said. "You've done enough." Rachel smiled sweetly, but her eyes were cold. "Mom, you've taken care of them so much already. Now it's time for you to rest and enjoy your own life." I knew what she really meant, a polite way to say, "Get out." Ethan hardly talked to me anymore. Every time I tried to start a conversation, he was busy, tired, no time right now. And I, the person he once turned to for comfort, had become nothing more than a quiet inconvenience in my own home. I learned how to withdraw into myself. In the afternoons, I sat in the backyard on the old wooden chair, listening to the birds and trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I never wanted to cause trouble, I never did. I still believed that if I stayed patient and kind, things would go back to the way they were. But they never did. Then came the day of reckoning, the day I was thrown out of my own home. All those years of endurance collapsed on me like an avalanche. It wasn't Rachel who truly hurt me. She had never belonged to me anyway. It was Ethan, the son I once held in my arms, taught to walk, and sang to sleep through fevers. Standing there in silence, head down, unable to look at me. That silence that was the real betrayal. As I packed the small boxes and set them by the curb, I could still hear laughter inside the house, clinking glasses, music, chatter. No one came out to help. No one asked where I was going. No one offered me a glass of water. I called a taxi and took what was left of my life with me. I rented a small motel room and sat there in silence, wondering what to do next. In that little room, for the first time in years, I slept without whispers in the hallway, without judging eyes, without feeling like a burden. And in that stillness, a memory came rushing back. The house deed, the contract I had signed years ago, a small formality I had long forgotten. Ethan had once added my name as co-owner, as a thank you for helping him buy the house. He had never revoked it, maybe he didn't even remember. In the middle of the night, I sat up, my heart pounding. In the darkness, I saw a faint light, a flicker of justice. I didn't know yet what I would do with this information. I didn't want revenge, and I didn't want drama. That was never who I was. But for the first time in years, I felt like a part of me still belonged there. And maybe, just maybe, this was the path to reclaim my voice. You know that feeling when you're about to drown, and suddenly your fingers touch a solid rock beneath the water? That's exactly how I felt when I remembered that house deed. That night, in the small motel room, the ceiling fan hummed softly above me, while in my mind, a new plan began to take shape. I replayed every detail of the past, every gesture, every silence, every cold glance, and among those bitter memories, one image came sharply into focus. The day we signed the house papers. I remembered it vividly. Ethan sat beside me at the notary office in San Diego, his face glowing with gratitude for the money I'd given to help buy the house. Everything had been so simple. The notary explained the documents, and we both signed. Ethan insisted on adding my name to the title. "It's just for safety, Mom." "To be sure," he said. I never thought of it as protection for me. To me, it was a gesture of trust between family, natural, without hidden motives. But now, that small gesture had become my only lifeline. The next morning, before the sun rose, I woke with a clear purpose. For the first time in months, I felt a small thread of control in my hands. I put on my neatest clothes, simple but proper, and left the motel room. The notary office was still in the same old building downtown. The paint on the walls was peeling, but the front desk was still in its usual place. "Good. Morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" the young clerk asked with a polite smile. I took a deep breath to steady my voice. "I'd like to request a copy of a property title. It's under my name and my son's." I handed over my ID and the case number. He typed quickly, while my eyes wandered around the room, searching for calm. My heart pounded hard in my chest. A few minutes later, he printed a sheet, stamped it in red, and handed it to me. "Here's the certified copy. Everything's in order." My eyes scanned every line, and there it was. Owners: Ethan Miller, 50%. Linda Miller, 50%. I was still the legal owner of half that house. Leaving the office, my hands trembled and sweat ran down my palms. I didn't yet know what I would do next, but I knew one thing. I was not as weak as they thought. I went straight to a small law office on Broadway Avenue. I chose a discreet place with a good reputation I didn't want neighbors or relatives to know. This was between me and the truth. The lawyer was an older man with silver hair and glasses. His name was Robert Hayes. "Mrs. Linda, take your time," he said gently. "I'm here to listen." I handed him the property certificate. He read it carefully in silence, while I watched his expression, searching for even a small flicker of hope. After a few minutes, he looked up, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Linda, you have full legal ownership of 50% of the house. No one can force you to leave without your consent. They've been acting as if the house belongs entirely to them, but legally, it does not. And moreover, if you wish, you can sell your share." I felt my chest tighten. I didn't want revenge nor hatred. I only wanted fairness, respect, and dignity, the simple things that had been taken from me. If I wanted to sell my share, could I do that, Mr. Hayes? "Absolutely," Robert nodded. "We can find a suitable buyer, or handle it through the court if needed. What matters is that you have the right to act." That afternoon, I returned to the motel with a storm of thoughts in my head. I needed time to think clearly. In the weeks that followed, Mr. Hayes and I kept everything completely confidential. He found a discreet investor who specialized in purchasing partial property rights like mine. The man was polite, straightforward, and asked no unnecessary questions. He knew he was buying half a house that was occupied, and he didn't mind. The offer was fair. I sat in front of the contract filled with fine print, numbers, and clauses. I took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and signed. That signature was a rebirth. The end of dependence. The end of humiliation. The end of helplessness. I had reclaimed what was mine. And, more importantly, I had reclaimed myself. But I knew there was still one last piece of the puzzle, and it was getting close. After signing the contract, something inside me changed. It wasn't joy, nor complete relief, just the quiet feeling of an old weight slowly lifting. For the first time in years, I didn't have to rush anywhere. The days that followed passed in silence. I stayed in my small, quiet room, as if I had vanished from the world. The lawyer handled the paperwork, and the investor began the transfer process. Legally, everything was finalized. As for them, Rachel and Ethan, they still didn't know, and I wasn't in a hurry to tell them. That afternoon, while I was walking along the small beach in Santa Barbara, where I had been staying, my phone rang. It was Susan, my old neighbor from the neighborhood I used to live in. "Linda, have you heard? There's going to be a big party." "What kind of party?" I asked, my heartbeat slowing for a moment. "Rachel's hosting a celebration, a new chapter for the family. Her parents are going to live in the house permanently. They just finalized all the paperwork. They've invited friends, neighbors, everyone's welcome. It's this Saturday." The phrase "new chapter" kept echoing in my head. Yes, it truly was a new chapter, just not in the way they imagined. That news didn't make me angry. It made me decisive. I knew this was the perfect moment not to argue, not to cry, but to respond with silence, a silence powerful enough to shake them. On Saturday evening, I put on a simple but elegant navy blue dress. My hair was neatly pinned, held by a small silver clip. Light makeup just enough. I wanted to walk in with the grace and dignity they once took from me. At exactly 7 p.m., I stepped out of the taxi in front of that house. The house that once held my warmth, now just an empty shell of betrayal. But I was not alone. Beside me was Mr. James Cooper, the new owner, a polite, composed man in a gray suit. He fully understood the role he was about to play and respected the heavy silence I carried with me. Loud music poured from the windows. Laughter filled the garden. White and gold balloons lined the walkway. A large sign hung on the porch that read, "Welcome to the family's new chapter." I took a deep breath. It was no longer my home, but my name still lived in the documents that built it. We walked up to the door. The temporary doorman, a friend of Ethan's, stared wide-eyed when he saw me. "Mrs. Linda, we didn't expect you to come." I gave a gentle smile. "Tonight, I think my presence is necessary." We stepped inside. The room was packed. Friends, neighbors, relatives. The chatter slowly faded, then stopped completely as people realized who I was. The air grew thick. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. In the center of the room, Rachel and Ethan stood side by side, surrounded by her parents and a few close guests. The champagne glass in Rachel's hand trembled when she saw me. Ethan turned pale. No one spoke for several seconds. That silence was louder than any music. I walked forward slowly, but deliberately, and stopped in front of them. "Good evening," I said calmly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I just came to congratulate the family on their new chapter." Rachel forced a nervous smile. "Of course, Mrs. Linda. You're always welcome here," she said, her voice trembling as she tried to keep her composure. At that moment, Cooper, standing beside me, spoke gently, his calm voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Good evening, everyone. Just a brief announcement. According to the records filed 2 weeks ago, I have purchased 50% ownership of this house, the portion previously held by Mrs. Linda Miller. I'm here tonight out of courtesy, but in the coming days, we'll be sending a formal notice regarding the division of ownership or the potential sale of the entire property." The room fell into complete silence. The celebration froze in place. Rachel stood speechless. Ethan stared at me, searching for an answer I no longer cared to give. Her father choked on his drink. Her mother covered her mouth in shock. There were no arguments, no tears, only the weight of truth dropping squarely into the middle of the party. I spoke slowly, each word clear and deliberate. For years, I lived quietly in this house, as an invisible shadow, a dismissed helper, a love taken for granted. Now I'm ending this chapter not with hatred, but with justice. I turned and walked away, utterly composed. Mr. Cooper walked beside me. Behind us, only murmurs and heavy breaths lingered. Stepping outside, I took a deep breath. The California night sky, full of stars, seemed to embrace me. The ocean breeze brushed my face like a whisper of freedom. I got into the taxi. The driver, unaware of what had just happened, glanced at me through the mirror. "Where to, ma'am?" I smiled, looking toward the distant waves. "Home. To my home." And the car began to move, carrying me away, leaving the past behind and beginning an entirely new chapter of my life. From that night on, the house that once turned me into a burden was no longer my pain. It was the end of a chapter filled with wounds and the beginning of something I thought I had lost forever: peace. People say that after a great storm, the sea is always calmer and more beautiful. The next morning, I truly understood that. I woke up early, the stunned look in Rachel's and Ethan's eyes still echoing in my mind from the night before. But instead of worry or trembling like I used to, all I felt inside was complete stillness. A strange peace, a little empty at first, yet as warm as the first breath after a storm. I opened the window of my small room in Santa Barbara, letting the ocean breeze rush in. The gentle wind brushed my cheek, as if whispering, "Now it's just you, Linda." In the days that followed, Ethan tried calling me several times. I saw his name appear on the screen, but I didn't answer. Not out of anger or pride, but because I knew he still wasn't ready to speak truthfully. As for Rachel, of course she never reached out. And I didn't expect her to. A few weeks later, my lawyer, Mr. Robert Hayes, called with news. The ownership transfer had been officially completed. Now, their family was required to negotiate their departure from the house. The home that had once symbolized their stability was now filled only with unease and anxiety. But I no longer cared about that. I had moved into another chapter of my life. With the money from selling my share, I found a small, cozy place that was completely mine. A 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the ocean, with a living room full of sunlight and a balcony that danced with the wind. The old wooden floors creaked softly under my feet, reminding me of my childhood home in the Midwest. There was room for books, for plants, and for memories. When I turned the key for the first time, my heart opened with the door. Here it was, my new beginning. I cared for every little detail, choosing bright curtains, buying pillows in ocean blue and sand tones, bringing along the few boxes I had left since the day I was thrown out. Each item I placed felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. On a small cabinet in the living room, I set down a framed photo of Ethan as a boy. That innocent smile tightened my chest, not out of anger, but from the ache of a love once whole. Mornings soon became my favorite time. I'd walk barefoot along the beach before the sun fully rose, feeling the salt in the breeze, hearing the waves, and breathing in the scent of freedom. Everything around me seemed to whisper, "I'm still alive." One morning, as I walked along the damp sand, an elderly woman holding her granddaughter approached with a warm smile. "Do you live here?" she asked, her voice soft like the waves. I smiled, eyes on the ocean. "Now I do." We sat and talked for a while, 2 women, 2 generations, sharing the quiet peace that comes after life's storms. We talked about flowers, old recipes, and the small joys only those who have lost much can truly appreciate. And in that moment, I realized no matter how much pain I had endured, there was still room in me for new connections. I didn't need to carry the pain, only the lessons. Little by little, I grew fond of the small market near my home. I befriended Sarah, the cheerful florist, and Mr. Frank, the witty old newspaper seller. Each new face restored a small piece of the kindness I once thought was gone. No more luxury, no more parties. But I had dignity and freedom. At last, I understood what my late husband, Mark, once told me. Freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about not needing anything more. One afternoon, a few months later, a sudden knock echoed on my door. I opened it, and standing there was Jack, my oldest grandson, now 13. His face had begun to show the features of a young man, his eyes bright but shy. "Grandma," he whispered. My heart tightened. I couldn't say a word. I just smiled. The kind of smile only a grandmother can give her grandchild. "Come in, sweetheart." We sat out on the balcony, the air filled with a tender awkwardness. Jack fiddled with the string on his hoodie, then softly said, I missed you so much, Grandma. Did you know that?" I swallowed hard, tears welling up, but kept my voice gentle. "I missed you too, honey. Very much." He went on, his voice lower. "I don't really understand what happened. Mom and Dad just said, you didn't want to live with us anymore. But I miss you. I miss when you made cookies, told us bedtime stories, and the afternoons we played in the yard." I smiled sadly. "Adults aren't always good at explaining things, sweetheart. But what matters is, my love for you has never changed, and it never will." The boy moved closer and hugged me tightly. In that small embrace, I knew not everything was lost. Even if adults drift apart, even if ingratitude creeps in, the pure love between a grandmother and her grandchild still remains. We talked for hours. I told him about the ocean, the plants I'd been growing, and the sunsets I watched each evening from the balcony of my little apartment in Santa Barbara. He listened intently, eyes bright, as if rediscovering the grandmother someone had tried to erase from his memory. Before leaving, he held my hand tightly. "Grandma, can I come visit again?" I smiled, the warmest smile I had in years. "This door will always be open for you. Forever." When he left, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the sun sink behind the ocean. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and gold, a tender masterpiece only nature could create. I thought of everything: the years of being dismissed, the heavy silences, and the countless times I'd been pushed out of my own life. But as the sea breeze brushed my face, I understood a person's worth isn't measured by how much they're accepted, but by their courage to stay true to themselves. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need revenge. I only needed to keep my dignity, even when others tried to take it away. Now, I walk lighter, carrying only what makes me happy: my books, a few small plants, the memories of Mark, my late husband, and the innocent smiles of my grandchildren. The ones who truly love me. Freedom, at last, smells like the sea. Some choices, no matter how hard, are like a stone dropped into a still lake. The ripples spread slowly, but they always reach every shore. In the months after I sold my share of the house, those ripples began to return from the other side. I didn't go looking for news, but somehow it always found me. Old friends and neighbors whispered, "Did you hear? Linda sold her share of the house." Who would have thought? Rachel, once proud and confident, began to panic. The house, which she once saw as a symbol of power and status, had become a burden. James Cooper, the new owner, remained as polite as ever. He sent a formal notice, requesting negotiations for their departure. No threats, no pressure. Everything handled with the same calm I had always carried. But the truth was clear. Either they bought back the half that wasn't theirs, or they had to leave. And that was when Rachel's confident facade began to crack. Her father had lost his job years ago, surviving on a small pension and a few old debts. Her mother's chronic illness demanded expensive medication. And Ethan, my son, kept working hard, but he had never learned how to manage money. The loans that fueled Rachel's lavish lifestyle had become shackles. The mortgage, the credit cards, the new car, all of it had been an illusion. And when it came time to buy back half the house, they realized they had never truly had the money at all. Then, the arguments inside their house began to erupt. They fought about whose fault it was, about who had missed the legal details, and even about the old woman's scheme, as some of their friends called it. It's easy for people who've never suffered to flip the story. According to the neighbors, Rachel went around complaining, claiming she was the victim of injustice. She had always been good at telling stories, especially to those who didn't know the truth. How could she do this after everything we've done for her? They said. Yes, they did do things. They threw me out of the house, erased me from the family photos, and turned my love into something shameful, a burden. But despite it all, I was at peace, not gloating, not rejoicing in their downfall, just relieved. Relieved because, at last, I was truly free. One late afternoon, while I was watering the plants on my balcony, the doorbell rang. The building's security guard called through the intercom. "Mrs. Linda, your son Ethan is here." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected that. It took me a few seconds to respond. Staring at the horizon, I finally said softly, "Let him up." A few minutes later, Ethan stepped inside. He looked thinner, his face hollow, carrying the weight of all the years that had built and then collapsed. It was strange seeing him in this small apartment so different from the big house we once shared. He seemed younger somehow, or maybe he had finally shed the proud shell that once kept him distant from me. "Hi, Mom." His voice trembled, small like a child's. "Hello, Ethan," I answered gently. We looked at each other for a few seconds, the longest silence of our lives. Then he spoke, his voice rough and low. "I came to apologize." I didn't answer, just stayed quiet, letting Ethan continue. "I know I was wrong, Mom. I didn't protect you the way I should have. I hid behind my comfort, behind my own cowardice. I let Rachel speak for me too many times. And when you left, I should have gone after you. But I didn't. I didn't have the courage." His eyes were red. "Now, we've lost everything, Mom." I sighed, calm and steady. "No, son. You haven't lost everything. You only lost the house. What you truly lost was the chance to respect your mother when it still mattered." Ethan hung his head like a scolded child. "I never wanted things to go this far," he murmured. "But they did," I said quietly. "And I never wanted to be thrown out of the very house I helped build. But that happened too." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "I just want you to know that I regret it." I stepped closer, took his hand. "Regret doesn't erase the past, my son. But it can be the beginning of something new if you truly want to live differently." He nodded, his face weary, shoulders slumped. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that now I understand." I gave a sad smile. "Understanding doesn't change the past, Ethan. But it can change the man you choose to become." We hugged a gentle, brief embrace, yet full of meaning. No more words were needed. When he left, I stood by the balcony window, watching his figure fade away. Perhaps it was a sign of late-blooming maturity, or maybe just a final apology to help him find peace within himself. A few days later, I heard the news. The house had been officially handed over to its new owner. Rachel and her parents had moved out, renting a small apartment in the suburbs, far less comfortable than before. The house that once felt like my emotional prison no longer belonged to any of us. I had truly closed that chapter. Now, my freedom wasn't just a feeling. It was real. No chains tied me to that story of ingratitude anymore. One quiet morning, as I sat drinking coffee with a warm slice of cheesecake from the corner bakery, I opened my notebook, the one where I wrote a few lines each day, to clear my soul. That morning, I wrote, "Love should never have to beg. Respect cannot be forced. Presence cannot be bought. And dignity isn't found in great victories, but in the quiet strength of silence when the world tries to make you disappear." I closed the notebook and smiled. In that moment, I finally understood my new beginning didn't come from what I reclaimed from them, but from what I gave back to myself. Life has a strange way of teaching people first. It gives you love, then forces you to learn to let go. And finally, it grants you understanding. A few weeks after my meeting with Ethan, my life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. Morning walks along the beach, coffee on the balcony, a small household tasks. Everything flowed with a calmness I once thought I'd lost forever. I had never needed much. I'd always been a woman of little means, but my heart was full. My neighbors now called me simply Linda. Sarah, the florist, always saved me the prettiest hydrangeas. Mr. Frank, the old newspaper vendor, kept a morning paper aside for me with a kind smile. Those small gestures, over time, formed a new circle of belonging. And then, on one of those simple mornings, I received another surprise. This time, it was my two grandchildren, Jack and Emma. Both had that same look in their eyes, a mix of innocence and longing, just like the old days when they lived with me. "Grandma!" they shouted together, their voices carried by the ocean breeze. I opened the door, wrapped them in my arms, breathing in. the scent of their hair, their warmth, and the tiny arms clinging tightly around my neck. Tears welled up, but I held them back. In that moment, all the years of distance melted away, leaving only the pure joy of reunion. We sat in my small living room as I made them hot cocoa, their favorite since they were little. Before long, laughter filled the seaside apartment that had once known only silence and the sound of waves. Jack, now with the deepening voice of a young teen, looked at me seriously. "Grandma, Dad told us a little bit about what happened. I understand things better now. Mom doesn't want us to talk about it much, but we miss you a lot. That house isn't the same anymore." Emma, with her big round eyes, added softly, "I like it here more. It feels peaceful." I smiled warmly and answered gently, "My loves, a house has never been what truly matters. It's the people inside it who make it a home. And whenever you want, this door will always be open for you, not out of obligation, but because real love has never left this place." We talked for hours about school, new friends, and the little dreams I prayed they would always keep. They told me about cartoons they liked, bike rides around the neighborhood, and the small challenges of growing up. And I listened as if time had turned back, as if the universe was quietly returning the missing pieces of what had once been taken from me. That night, after my grandchildren left, I sat alone again on the balcony, watching the California sea whisper old stories. I thought for a long time about the road I had taken to reach this moment. For years, my life had been confined to convenient roles: the easygoing mother, the helpful mother-in-law, the always available grandmother, the woman who yielded to everyone. Until the day I realized when you accept being a supporting character in your own life, someone else will hold the pen to write the rest of it. Today, I've reclaimed the right to write my own story. I no longer need anyone's approval. What keeps me steady now isn't the need to be accepted, but the freedom to simply be myself, even in silence. Time passed. One day, I received a letter. It was from Ethan. No excuses, no pleas for forgiveness, just a few simple lines. "If one day there's still a place for me in your heart, I hope my kids can keep their bond with you. I respect your silence. And now, I understand how deeply I was wrong. I wish you peace. Love, Ethan." I folded the letter and placed it inside an old wooden box, along with a few faded family photos, not out of resentment, but because some words only need to be read, not answered. A mother's love never disappears, it only changes shape. Another afternoon, the city held a small fair at the Central Plaza. Handmade stalls, children's laughter, and soft acoustic music filled the warm air of Southern California. As I strolled through the booths, I saw a group of older women chatting around a wooden table. Their faces were familiar, the ones I greeted every morning on my walks. One of them smiled and waved. "Linda, come sit with us." I sat down, feeling a quiet warmth of belonging. We talked about everything: our children, our grandchildren, the coming summer heat. Simple stories I once thought trivial, but that now felt precious. Then, one elderly woman looked at me closely and said gently, "You know, Linda, there's a peacefulness in your eyes, like someone who's been through storms and still found calm." I smiled, my eyes glistening a little. Maybe so, because now I understand that peace doesn't come from what we hold on to, but from what we're brave enough to let go. The group fell silent, nodding. It was a moment that needed no words, yet everyone understood. That night, when I got home, I closed the balcony doors, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, and I sat with my old notebook. I held my pen, feeling at ease, and wrote, "Some connections are like autumn leaves, beautiful while they're on the branch, but most free when they fall. I've learned to let go of what can no longer lift me." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and fell asleep with a light heart finally, whole. Linda's story is a journey of pain, forgiveness, and rediscovery. Though told with changed names and settings, it is a fiction inspired by real experiences ones many can relate to. Those who have stayed silent out of love or spoken up to protect their dignity. Perhaps we've all faced that moment when to endure and when to stand up for ourselves. There is no perfect answer, only the path our hearts choose to follow. Linda chose silence at the right time, not from weakness, but from the strength of grace. And in the end, God granted her the most precious gift of all, peace within her soul. Thank you for walking beside Linda. Before you go, I invite you to watch two stories on the screen's end, each one a journey of courage and faith.